what do we really know about the Vikings? And when it comes to Norse mythology, which stories are true and which stories are just too wild for them to even have happened? Welcome back to the Hive, my bumblebees. This is the top 10 legends of the Viking Age Decoded. Let me know down in the comments which one of these is your favorite and if you have any Norse legends that you really love. Number 10, the Curse of Andvari's Ring. Have you ever wondered where Tolkien got his inspiration from for his most famous tale, The Lord of the Rings? Well, it's likely that at least some of it, or the heart of the tale, shall we say, was inspired by Norse mythology. We're talking here about the Curse of Andvari's Ring. What is this tale about? Well, it's actually kind of a couple of tales that are connected by the ring itself. The story is much too long for me to retell all of it here. That could be a whole video all its own if you wanted it. But basically, the connecting point is the ring itself, whose curse brings about much tragedy in the life of anyone who possesses it. The tale involves many different points of tragedy, including gruesome demises, but also features various mythical beasts and fascinating fantasy-like characters, as well as historical figure Attila the Hun. Number 9, Sif's Beautiful Ox. This is a strange one, but also a good one, and we even see it referenced in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as well, which of course has some Norse myth woven in via the involvement of characters like Thor, Loki, and Odin, who are all taken from Norse mythology themselves, which of course is public domain, which is why you see so many different versions of them in comics and across multiple types of media. In this story, Loki cuts off Thor's love, Sif's hair, while she sleeps. Thor is enraged by this act as he loved Sif's golden hair. So, to avoid Thor's anger, Loki is tasked with finding replacement hair for Sif. He basically has a wig crafted by the dwarves, which is spun out of basically pure gold. And the wig is so beautiful that Thor's anger is soothed, and Sif is once more proclaimed as one of the most beautiful women, possibly even more beautiful than she was before with her natural hair, because that's how dang gorgeous that wig was. Number 8, Odin's Gift. There are some really weird stories in Norse mythology, as there are in all kinds of mythology really. One such story tells the tale of how Odin got his 8-legged horse, Sleipnir. Sleipnir, it turns out, was actually the child of Loki. If you think it's weird that Loki had a horse for a child, you do not know Loki. Loki has a lot of weird stuff, and that actually isn't even the weirdest part of this story. The weirdest part is in both how Loki became the parent of Sleipnir, and in addition, why Loki had the child to begin with. Loki basically had this child as part of a way to trick a giant who was building a castle for the Norse gods, who they ultimately decided they no longer wanted to pay for his work due to him using a horse for much of the labor, and I guess they just felt like, you know what, that's kind of cheating, so we're not going to give him what we promised. Loki turned into a female horse and seduced the giant's horse with their night of passion, resulting in the birth of Sleipnir, who was later then, get this, gifted to Odin, as he was considered to be the fastest steed in all of the 9 realms. But Sleipnir didn't just become Odin's horse, he also became one of Odin's most trusted companions. I don't know if that's more weird or less weird. I think it's less weird because I guess technically it's like his grandson. Number 7, the World Serpent. The World Serpent, or the Midgard Serpent, also known as Jormungandr, is also a child of Loki's. Yeah, Loki has a lot of children, and all of them are pretty noteworthy and kind of weird. The Midgard Serpent definitely included there. The Midgard Serpent is the son of Loki and the giant Angrboda. Like many of Loki's children other than Sleipnir, the Midgard Serpent was banished. A lot of Loki's kids, Odin was like, I don't want to deal with them, so I'm just gonna send them away. There was also a prophecy of Jormungandr which came to pass involving Ragnarok. It was said that during Ragnarok, the World Serpent would be slain by Thor, but that in turn, the serpent would also take Thor's life as well. Number 6, Athelstan. If you are like me and you're a big Vikings fan, then you've probably wondered on how much of it is historically accurate. For example, I think many of us fell in love with the character Athelstan early on, as he had a fascinating journey, having been a Christian who was then taken by the Vikings, and yet who was kind of permitted to keep his own religious beliefs and even sort of shared them with the Vikings, also listening in turn to their own different beliefs. We also follow him on a journey of self-discovery as he struggles to find his place in this new and to him very foreign world, attempting to hold on to his beliefs while also somewhat opening up to his captors, who kind of become more like family to him over time. Was Athelstan based on a real person though? Kind of. There was an Athelstan who probably served to inspire the character in the show, but instead of being the father to King Alfred, historically he was instead the grandson of Alfred. He used his grandfather's great deeds to build on his own legacy and his own policies. He also ended up conquering the final Vikings who were settled in and ruled York, so kind of a different connection to the Vikings in the historical version of that story. Number 5, the legend of Ragnar. Speaking of Vikings, what about the initial main character of the Viking series, Ragnar Lothbrok? Was he real? Yes, or well, as real as a man of legend can be. Ragnar Lothbrok or Lothbrok's true existence is still a question of much debate today. The issue is, we don't have clear records of him. But this was also because he was born at a time when records of births and deaths, they weren't really kept. The other issue with the tales of his great adventures and accomplishments are that they weren't recorded until around 350 years after his existence, which obviously is going to make us question how accurate those might be after all that time, with people instead verbally passing on his tales, which of course could lead to them being warped or embellished. Most historians believe it's more likely that Ragnar, who was said to have become the king of Sweden and Denmark during his time, was actually not one person, but actually several accomplished individuals who basically all got rolled into one person through storytelling and just became this legendary figure. That tends to be how these things go. Number 4, Ragnar and Lera. As long as you believe that Ragnar is indeed one person and is real, it is actually true that he was married to Lera, or at least one of the Ragnars that makes up the Viking warrior of myth was. And if you were also wondering if Lera, who also appears as a character in Vikings, was actually a badass shield maiden, I can confirm she apparently indeed was. She was a Viking ruler who hailed from what we know in modern times as Norway. And yeah, she was apparently super fierce, IRL. Perhaps even more fierce than she's presented as being in the show. Number 3, Loki's punishment. Loki ended up being punished for the death of Balder, who is considered to be one of the most dear sons of Odin and Frigg, and who during his life was known as the god of light and justice. It makes sense. If you killed Balder, he's the god of light and justice. I'd be upset too. I'd be like, dude, that guy was great. Although Loki himself did not kill Balder, he was involved in basically creating the conspiracy which then led to Balder's death, and he did this knowingly, making it come to pass. As a result, once captured, the gods took Loki to a cave. There they bound him to a rock and had a venomous snake positioned over top of his face, so that it would drip venom into his eyes or onto his face for basically forever. The pain from the venom was immense, but fortunately Singuna, Loki's wife, stayed with him and held a bowl over his face to spare him from the venom. However, when the bowl filled, well, she would have to turn away to empty it because it wasn't a bottomless bowl. And it was said that when Loki writhed in pain from the venom in those moments, the earth actually shook. So apparently, if you experience an earthquake, it could be because of Loki. Number 2, shield maidens. While proof of shield maidens in the Viking Age is somewhat limited, it is actually believed that women indeed were warriors and rulers during this time, or at least they could be such. However, it's still believed to have been more rare, so if you see it depicted in movies or in stories where there's all these female warriors, that might not be as accurate. But we do have records and evidence that point to some women actively participating in warfare and ruling other Vikings as well. Though some of the findings, like I said, are still undetermined and much is still debated among historians in terms of how common and how involved the shield maidens may have been, and in terms of how accurate this evidence is and how you want to interpret it, because obviously, when you find stuff, when you find bones, you're gonna have to interpret, what does it mean that they were here? And with these weapons, is this a warrior? Is this just a grave where all these things were put together? Who knows? Number 1, Legara and the Bear. It was said at one point that Legara actually sicked a bear on Ragnar when he courted her. I love this story. I think it's so fun, and it is a story of Norse legend and myth. Apparently, she was curious to see how far he would actually take his pursuit of her and how serious he was. So at one point, she just casually invited him to visit her and then surprised him by having her pet bear attack him. Also, who has a pet bear? You know you're cool when you have a pet bear. Ragnar was not dissuaded though, and supposedly defeated her poor pet bear. I would actually be really upset if someone did that, but for Legara, this allowed Ragnar to win her hand and probably honestly her heart as well, because she's probably super impressed that he defeated a bear. Well, that's about it for this video. Until next time, I'll see you in the future.